Ladies and gentlemen, the hardest thing you'll ever do is walk away from someone you still love. Not because they're evil, not because they never gave you good moments, but because you finally realized loving them was costing you you. You see, we stay, not out of strength, but out of sentiment. And that sentiment, it's the quiet killer of self-respect. So if you've ever silenced your needs, lowered your standards, or begged for the bare minimum, this is your wake-up call. Because love should never require you to abandon yourself to keep it. We often confuse emotional depth with emotional recklessness. Feeling something intensely doesn't mean it deserves to dictate the direction of your life. Emotions are powerful guides, but they are terrible masters. If every time you feel hurt, excited, rejected, or adored, you let that emotion decide your actions, you're surrendering control of your life to something fleeting. That doesn't make you deep, it makes you reactive. Emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about understanding them, learning from them, and then deciding what to do. You are allowed to feel angry without sending that message. You're allowed to feel lonely without running back to someone who hurt you. You're allowed to feel disappointed without turning bitter. The strength lies in what you do next. People often glorify being led by the heart, as if it's always romantic or noble. But being ruled by emotion without the filter of reason can lead to some of the worst decisions you'll ever make. Just because something feels right doesn't mean it is right. Some of the most painful relationships, toxic patterns, and damaging behaviors begin with a feeling that felt amazing in the moment. That electric spark doesn't guarantee long-term safety or happiness. Emotional depth should never be confused with emotional chaos. The more intense the emotion, the more carefully it should be handled. It's like fire. It can light your path or burn your entire world down. You don't have to extinguish your emotions, but you must learn to contain them. There's a myth that if we don't act on our emotions immediately, we're not being authentic. That's a lie that keeps people stuck in cycles of impulsive behavior and regret. Real authenticity means knowing what you feel and still having the presence of mind to ask, is this helpful? Is this healthy? Is this aligned with the person I want to be? Not every thought needs to be voiced and not every feeling needs to be acted on. In fact, emotional maturity is measured by how many impulses you can pause on. It's not about denial, it's about discipline. Being emotionally aware means taking a moment to step back, breathe, and choose how you respond. That's where true strength lies, in the space between the emotion and the action. When you let emotions control your decisions, you're often trying to escape discomfort rather than face reality. You might text someone because the silence makes you anxious, not because it's the right move. You might stay in a relationship because you fear loneliness, not because it's still serving you. You might explode in anger because it feels better than sitting with your hurt. But none of these choices lead to long-term peace. They offer a temporary release at the cost of long-term clarity. Running from discomfort will always take you further from growth. Sometimes the most emotionally intelligent decision is the hardest one. To sit in the discomfort and let the feeling pass without acting on it. That's where wisdom is built. There's a difference between honoring your emotions and obeying them. You can acknowledge that you feel jealous without letting it poison your relationships. You can notice that you feel scared without letting it stop you from taking risks. Emotions are data, not directives. They show you something valuable about your internal state, but they don't always reflect external truth. Just because you feel rejected doesn't mean you are actually abandoned. Just because you feel unlovable doesn't mean you're not worthy of love. Learning to decode your emotional signals without treating them as facts is essential. The more you understand your emotional patterns, the less power they have to sabotage you. Many people confuse being emotional with being connected to themselves, but it's often the opposite. When your feelings constantly override your logic, you're not being connected, you're being hijacked. Emotional hijacking pulls you away from your values, your standards, and your goals. You end up reacting in ways that feel out of character, simply because the emotion in the moment is overwhelming. This disconnect leaves you drained and confused about who you really are. It's only when you can sit with your feelings without needing to explode or collapse that you begin to access your real power. Self-connection doesn't mean indulging every mood, it means being grounded enough to see the feeling without becoming the feeling. Taking ownership of your emotions means no longer blaming others for how you act. Yes, someone may have triggered you. Yes, the situation might be unfair, but what you do in response, that's on you. When you stop making excuses for impulsive choices and start taking responsibility, you reclaim your power. People who are constantly emotionally reactive often live in a world where everything feels like a threat. But when you develop control over your emotional responses, you become resilient instead of volatile. Life will always test you, people will disappoint you, but your power lies in how you respond, not how you feel in the moment. It's that response that shapes your reality, not the emotion itself. You are not weak for having strong feelings, but you are limited if those feelings are always in the driver's seat. Life requires a balance of heart and head. The heart brings passion, purpose, and sensitivity. The head brings strategy, discernment, and boundaries. Without both, you'll either burn out from emotional overload or become cold and disconnected. The goal is integration, to let emotion inform you, not consume you. To live aligned with your values, not just your moods. This doesn't mean becoming robotic, it means becoming centered. It means building a life where your actions are intentional, not just reactive waves caused by every emotional storm that passes through. Every time you pause before reacting, you build emotional strength. Every time you sit with a feeling instead of spilling it everywhere, you develop self-mastery. The small choices, not sending the angry message, not spiraling into anxious behavior, not chasing temporary comfort, are where you build real confidence. You begin to trust yourself not just to feel, but to handle. That's the ultimate form of empowerment, knowing that your emotions can be intense without being dangerous. You can be passionate and still patient. You can be wounded and still wise. That's what separates people who grow from people who just stay hurt. Strength isn't emotional absence, it's emotional leadership. In the end, you are the one who lives with the consequences of your choices. If you keep letting emotion drive your decisions, you'll continue to wake up in situations that don't reflect the life you want. But if you begin to build that space between feeling and action, you unlock an entirely different version of yourself, one that's rooted, not reckless. You can still be sensitive, still be open-hearted, and still deeply care. But you'll stop being at the mercy of every emotional wave. You'll begin to live in alignment with your higher self, not just your momentary self. And that's when you stop being an emotional fool and start becoming emotionally free. We live in a world that romanticizes intensity. The more passionate, chaotic, or dramatic a connection feels, the more we're told it must mean something real. But intensity isn't the same as compatibility. That rush of adrenaline, the constant uncertainty, the push and pull, it may feel exhilarating, but it often masks something toxic. Many people mistake anxiety for excitement, tension for attraction, and inconsistency for mystery. But when someone's behavior keeps you in a cycle of confusion, it's not magic, it's manipulation or emotional unavailability. Romanticizing red flags is what keeps people stuck in patterns that hurt them. Just because something feels familiar doesn't make it safe. You have to stop confusing emotional roller coasters with real connection. Every time you justify disrespect because you have a strong connection, you teach yourself to settle. It's one thing to have chemistry with someone. It's another to have consistency, care, and accountability. Red flags aren't quirks to overlook. They are warnings. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. It just delays the damage. That one dismissive comment, that first broken promise, that gut feeling you brushed off, these are not minor moments. They're signs that something is misaligned. And yet, because the highs feel so good, people tolerate the lows. The pattern becomes addictive. You keep waiting for the return of the good version of them. But real love doesn't come with emotional whiplash. It's steady, safe, and secure. One of the most common mistakes people make is falling for potential. You see glimpses of who someone could be, who they are when they're at their best, and you cling to that version. You tell yourself they're just going through a rough time, or that they'll change once they see how much you care. But falling in love with potential is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. You end up becoming their emotional caretaker, their personal therapist, or their source of motivation. Roles that should never be confused with love. Why? You deserve someone who shows up for you now, not someone who might show up for you later. Holding on to potential is like building a house on sand. It doesn't matter how beautiful the idea is if there's no stable foundation beneath it. People don't change because you love them hard enough. They change because they want to. And even then, it's not guaranteed. You can't heal someone by breaking yourself. Yet that's what happens when you ignore red flags. You start overcompensating, you walk on eggshells, you suppress your needs because you don't want to seem too demanding. But slowly you start to vanish in the relationship. Your voice gets quieter, your standards get lower, your identity starts to revolve around managing their moods. Love should never make you shrink. If it requires you to ignore your instincts, it's not love. It's emotional self-abandonment. Staying with someone who consistently hurts you doesn't make you loyal. It makes you unavailable to yourself. When you ignore red flags, you're not just tolerating someone else's behavior, you're training yourself to accept less than you deserve. You normalize dysfunction. You start to believe that being anxious, confused, or constantly trying to fix the relationship is just part of love. But it's not. That's survival mode. And love should never feel like survival. A healthy connection brings clarity, not chaos. It builds you rather than breaking you down. When you stop romanticizing red flags, you open space to meet someone whose presence brings peace instead of pressure. You begin to realize that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. It can be calm, mutual, and deeply fulfilling. There's a quiet power in walking away from something that doesn't serve you, even when your heart is still attached. Emotional maturity is being able to say, I care about you, but I won't keep betraying myself to stay with you. That decision doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from wisdom. You start to understand that the right relationship won't require constant emotional gymnastics. You won't have to keep proving your worth or begging for basic respect. You won't feel like you're always one misstep away from losing their affection. When you stop idolizing people who mistreat you, you reclaim your own value. You see that love isn't supposed to cost your peace, your boundaries, or your dignity. Sometimes we hold on because we're afraid we won't feel that spark again, but the spark isn't special if it's only lit in dysfunction. That butterflies in your stomach feeling can come from anxiety, not love. If someone keeps you emotionally off balance, of course they'll feel addictive. It's the emotional equivalent of a slot machine. Every now and then you get a hit of affection, and that keeps you hooked. But that's not passion, that's a trauma bond. Healthy love doesn't feel like withdrawal when it's gone. It feels like support when it's present. The truth is, you can still feel chemistry with someone and have the clarity to say, this isn't good for me. That's real strength. Not denying your feelings, but choosing yourself anyway. It takes courage to rewire the beliefs that kept you chasing red flags. Maybe you were raised around instability and now it feels normal. Maybe chaos feels like home because that's all you've known. But part of healing is learning that safety can be exciting too. You don't have to settle for emotional turbulence just because it feels familiar. The nervous system can adapt. At first, a healthy relationship might feel boring because peace is unfamiliar. But over time, it becomes the new standard. You stop mistaking anxiety for desire. You stop confusing unpredictability with depth. And you start choosing people who add to your life rather than drain it. That's when everything changes. You have to be willing to see things for what they are, not what you wish they were. Romanticizing red flags is often a defense mechanism. It protects you from the pain of disappointment, but avoiding the truth only prolongs the inevitable. If someone has shown you who they are through consistent behavior, believe them. No amount of excuses, justifications, or idealization can change that. The moment you choose to see clearly is the moment you start to heal. It's not easy. It requires grieving the illusion, but clarity is freedom. And once you stop clinging to what you hoped it could be, you can finally make room for what it was always meant to be. Something better, something real. Your feelings are real, but they're not always right. That deep attachment to someone who mistreats you doesn't mean you're meant to be with them. It just means you're human. But your heart doesn't have to run the show. You can acknowledge your emotions and still make a different choice. A choice that honors your worth. A choice that builds your future, not just comforts your past. Stop rewriting their behavior as just complicated when it's actually unhealthy. Stop calling dysfunction passion. Love yourself enough to walk away when the red flags wave, not when they destroy you. You don't have to keep learning the hard way. You just have to start choosing differently. Hope can be one of the most beautiful forces in the world, but when misused, it becomes a trap. It starts as a gentle belief that things will get better, that someone will change, that the story will take a different turn if you just hold on a little longer. But there's a point where hope stops being empowering and starts being paralyzing. You stop taking action, you stop seeing clearly, you start accepting less because you're too emotionally invested in what could be rather than what is. That kind of hope becomes a set of handcuffs. You're no longer choosing to stay, you feel bound to. It's no longer love. It's a fantasy fueled by fear of letting go. People often hold on to relationships long after they've expired, not because they're happy, but because they're hopeful. They replay memories, magnify potential, and convince themselves that the other person is just going through something. But patterns matter more than promises. Someone can say they want to be better and still never follow through. You have to look at actions over time, not just occasional words spoken in emotional moments. Hope becomes dangerous when it keeps you in a place of waiting instead of moving. You end up stuck in limbo, not moving forward, not really present, just emotionally suspended in a cycle of almost happy, almost healthy, almost enough. There's a deep pain that comes with realizing someone isn't who you hoped they would be. You saw their potential, you loved them for it. And letting go doesn't just feel like losing them, it feels like betraying the version of them you imagined. That's why so many people stay too long. They're not in love with the person in front of them, they're in love with the version they created in their mind. But you can't build a life on someone's potential. You can't sustain a relationship on dreams alone. At some point you have to come back to reality and ask yourself, who are they actually showing up as consistently? And is that someone who is ready, willing, and capable of giving you what you truly need? It's not unkind to let go of someone who can't meet you where you are. It's not cruel to walk away when someone keeps showing you they're not ready, not present, or not healthy. What's unkind is staying in a situation that keeps you both stuck. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and the other person is to release the relationship. Hope without action leads to resentment. The longer you stay waiting for them to get it together, the more you lose pieces of yourself. Your needs go unmet, your standards get blurry, you silence your intuition and allow for a future that may never arrive. There's nothing noble about self-abandonment in the name of hope. When you ignore reality in favor of potential, you become addicted to false promises. You cling to the rare good days like they're proof of progress, even when the bad days never truly go away. The inconsistency keeps you emotionally hooked. You start bargaining with yourself. Maybe if I'm more patient, maybe if I communicate better. But no matter how much you adjust, it never seems to be enough. That's because the change you're hoping for has to come from them. And if they're not choosing it on their own, they're not going to sustain it. Hope, in this case, just becomes a shield from the truth. And while the truth hurts, it's the only thing that can set you free. You don't have to be angry to walk away. You don't need a dramatic final fight to justify leaving. Sometimes you leave because you finally see things clearly. You realize that hope has kept you in place, but reality is asking you to move. Leaving a situation that's not growing doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're choosing yourself. You're choosing peace over potential, presence over promise, self-respect over sentimentality. And while it may feel heartbreaking in the moment, it's also the beginning of healing. The end of waiting, the return of your energy to yourself. You're no longer chained to who someone might become. You're free to pursue what you truly deserve. There's a quiet grief that comes from letting go of someone you believed in. You didn't just lose a person, you lost a vision, a story you told yourself, a future you planned in your heart. But grieving that doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you loved fully, you hoped deeply, and now you're choosing wisely. That's not failure, that's growth. It's okay to mourn what could have been, just don't let that mourning keep you. You in a place that's robbing your joy. You can carry both pain and clarity. You can miss them and still walk away. You can love them and still know it's time to close the chapter. These things aren't contradictions. They're evidence of strength. Some people will keep you around as long as you let them. They'll breadcrumb affection just enough to keep your hope alive. They'll say what you want to hear when they sense you pulling away. But watch the follow-through. Watch who they are when no ultimatum is hanging over their head. Watch what happens when you stop chasing. Real change isn't begged for, it's demonstrated. When someone really wants to be better, they don't need your suffering as motivation. They'll rise because they choose to, not because you waited long enough. Don't let someone else's indecision become your emotional prison. If they're unsure, let them be unsure on their own. You have a life to live. Letting go of false hope isn't about giving up on love. It's about making space for the kind of love that doesn't require suffering. The kind that shows up every day, not just when it's convenient, the kind that doesn't make you question your worth. Hope can still exist, but it must be rooted in reality. Hope without boundaries becomes self-harm. You need both heart and clarity, faith and facts, love and limits. When you stop letting hope blind you, you begin to see the difference between someone who's growing and someone who's just circling. One will meet you where you are, the other will keep you running in place. Choose accordingly. You deserve a relationship where you don't have to beg for the bare minimum, where you're not spending your nights overanalyzing mixed signals, where you don't feel like your emotional survival depends on whether or not someone texts you back. Hope should lift you, not keep you hostage. The next time you find yourself clinging to the idea of someone changing, ask yourself, if nothing ever changed, would I still choose this? If the answer is no, then your answer is clear. Don't wait for the pain to become unbearable. Don't wait until you don't recognize yourself. Set yourself free. Not because they were never worth hoping for, but because you are. There comes a point where sentiment must surrender to self-respect. It's easy to get caught up in nostalgia, to replay the memories that once made your heart race, to romanticize the good moments and overlook the painful ones. But love without respect is just attachment. And when you continually prioritize your feelings for someone over your responsibility to yourself, you start eroding your sense of worth. Loving someone doesn't require losing yourself. You can care deeply and still recognize that a situation is no longer serving you. There's nothing noble about staying in a place where your needs are minimized and your voice is ignored. Self-respect means asking, is this relationship honoring who I am? And being willing to walk away when the answer is no. When you put sentiment ahead of standards, you send a message to yourself that your emotions are more important than your boundaries. This might sound romantic, even poetic, but in practice it becomes destructive. You begin tolerating inconsistency. You forgive patterns, not mistakes. You stay quiet when you want to speak up, just to keep the peace. Over time, your silence becomes a habit, your tolerance becomes the norm, and your self-esteem takes a hit. It doesn't happen all at once, it happens slowly. Every time you swallow a hurt, dismiss a red flag, or downplay your needs. And before you know it, you're no longer choosing the relationship, you're surviving it. That's not love, that's emotional erosion. Respecting yourself sometimes means making hard decisions that hurt in the short term, but heal in the long run. It means not returning to a situation just because it feels familiar. It means not confusing comfort with compatibility. You may still love them, you may still miss them, but self-respect demands that you choose what's healthy over what's habitual. Even when your heart is aching, even when the memories feel louder than the reality, the people who truly care for you will respect your boundaries. They won't punish you for having self-worth. They won't guilt trip you into staying small. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you never love them. It means you finally learn to love you too. It's easy to believe that being kind means being endlessly available, that setting limits is cold or unloving. But true kindness includes kindness toward yourself. You can be compassionate without being compliant. You can be forgiving without being foolish. The idea that love means unconditional tolerance is dangerous. Love does not mean excusing repeated disrespect. It doesn't mean justifying someone's inability to show up for you. Self-respect is the line that protects your peace and preserves your identity. It allows you to love people without losing yourself in the process. Without that line, love becomes sacrifice, and not the healthy kind. The kind that empties you and leaves you wondering how you ended up so far from who you were. Staying in a relationship out of guilt, fear, or sentiment is not a service to anyone. When you hold on because you don't want to hurt them, you end up hurting both of you in the long run. Honesty may sting, but dishonesty erodes. You are not responsible for managing someone else's emotions at the expense of your own growth. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for both people is to be clear. Clarity is not cruelty. Boundaries are not betrayals. And choosing to leave is not an act of abandonment. It's an act of integrity. You don't have to hate someone to know they're not right for you. You just have to value yourself enough to stop pretending it's working when it's not. Self-respect changes the way you respond to love. You stop chasing people who are inconsistent. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop trying to earn what should be freely given. Care, presence, commitment. You realize that a relationship is not a reward for loyalty. It's a mutual exchange of energy, support, and effort. You no longer settle for crumbs just because they remind you of a full meal you once had. You begin to understand that being alone is far better than being undervalued. Loneliness isn't the enemy, disrespect is. And the more you respect yourself, the less interested you become in proving your value to people who can't see it. Sentiment often distorts the truth. It causes you to filter the past through a soft lens, highlighting the highlights and muting the harm. But self-respect demands that you see things as they are, not as you wish they were. It means asking hard questions. How do I feel when I'm around them? Am I thriving or just enduring? Do I feel safe, seen, and supported? Or do I constantly question where I stand? The answers to these questions may not always align with what you want to hear, but they will always bring you closer to what you need to know. Honoring those answers is how you reclaim your power. It's how you stop loving people at your own expense. You can still have love for someone and choose to love yourself more. That's not selfish, it's necessary. Self-respect is what keeps your heart intact when your emotions try to lead you back into harmful cycles. It's the quiet voice that says, I deserve better than this confusion. It's the decision to walk away, not out of pride, but out of preservation. You can wish them well from afar. You can cherish the good memories without needing to relive them. Growth often requires separation. Sometimes love matures by ending, by acknowledging that something once beautiful has run its course. And in that space, something deeper is born: clarity, peace, and a renewed sense of self. The relationships that last are not built on sentiment alone. They're built on mutual renaissance. Respect, communication, and consistency. They are safe enough to be honest, strong enough to grow, and stable enough to handle real life